hit the button and I'll let you know when it's ready to go. And we're live.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the May 4th Committee of the Whole meeting of the Exeter Township Board of School Directors. Before we get started this evening, I would like to say that this week we lost a member of our school community, Mr. Smith, and in recognition of this loss, I would like to have a moment of silence, please. Thank you. Okay. Moving on into our agenda, Mr. Fike, could you please do the roll call?
Allison Wilson.
Present.
Hunter Ahrens.
Present.
John Fiddler.
Here.
Dr. Ann Herring. Dr. David Hemberger.
Here.
Michael Chapina.
Here.
Dr. Sharon McClendon. Yuri Miller.
Here.
Michelle Stratton.
Here.
7 present, 2 absent.
Okay, thank you. Just a reminder that this is our committee of the whole meeting, and if you would like to make public comment tonight regarding a topic that we discuss, you will have the opportunity to do so at the end of our committee reports. Please send an email to questions@myexeter.org for instructions on how to join our Zoom later this evening. Before we move forward on our agenda, I'd also like to say that this week is Teacher Appreciation Week, and I would like to thank all of our teachers for their incredible dedication to our students this week and all school year. This has been an incredibly difficult year, and we appreciate all that you've done. As you can see, attached are our meeting minutes from our April meetings. Does anybody have any questions or concerns regarding the minutes that they would like addressed? Okay. Then we are going to move on in our agenda to our education committee. Dr. McClendon is out, so Mr. Fiddler is going to start that for us this evening.
All right, thank you, Allison. It looks like first up is Eric Flam with a special recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Fiddler. First, I'd like to, as far as recognition, I'd like to echo Mrs. Wilson's words in terms of teacher appreciation. Certainly our teachers have done an incredible job in the last year, and we're so thankful for their dedication and their efforts, and couldn't be more grateful for the job that they've done for our students. And I'd also like to let everyone know and remind everyone that this Thursday is School Nurse Appreciation Day, and certainly our nurses have done a phenomenal job as well. So we want to make sure that we recognize our school nurses as well. In addition, we want to recognize a number of our students, in particular some art students first, who participated in the BCIU Countywide Art Show. They'll have their artwork displayed in the Goggle Works from April 30th to May 20th in the Schmidt Gallery. So I have a couple more weeks to see their work if you'd like to. Carly Patton won the Hedwig Miller Fiber Award. It's a $100 award, as well as second place in the textile category. Megan Cano received an honorable mention in color photography. Bryn Pacha won third in the design category. Cora Zielinski won third in the hand-built pottery category. And again, their artwork will be on display at Goggle Works through May 20th. So if you have a chance to stop there and view it, please do so. Congratulations to all of our artists. In addition, Exeter Senior High has the opportunity to win $50,000 for the art department. Our Vans High School custom culture submission, designed by Bryn Patchell and Olivia Bianconi, was chosen as one of the top 50 in the nation. And voting continues through the end of this week, through Friday, May 7th at 5 p.m. Votes can be submitted at vans.com, custom culture. And we're hoping that Exeter is one of the nation's 5 finalists. And congratulations to Bryn and Olivia, and best of luck in the competition. And we certainly hope that Exeter can receive $50,000. Tremendous. And also, we want to recognize 8th graders Katie Hoover and Carson Frederick and their teacher Kevin Adams. Katie and Carson worked with Mr. Adams to create a video for the What's So Cool About Manufacturing contest. They took the top prize in Berks and Schuylkill counties with their video of American Polarizers Incorporated. They won the Outstanding Overall Program Award for the 2021 competition. And that was, again, a competition involving middle-level schools in Berks and Schuylkill counties. And I want to congratulate Mr. Adams for just doing a terrific job. He's terrifically talented and bright. And these students worked fully virtually on this project that highlights a manufacturing company. Each of these schools is assigned a manufacturer and challenged to create a 2-minute video describing the manufacturer, what they do, and presenting that to the community, and attempting to receive the most votes. And Mr. Adams and his team won the top prize, Outstanding Overall Program. So congratulations, Mr. Adams. And I know he's on the call. If he'd like to say something, I'd welcome him to do so.
Thank you so much, Dr. Flam, and thank you for your support over the past few years as I was getting my sea legs with this contest. And Dr. Flam got to come along on our trip last year and see firsthand what the students do with the manufacturers, and it was just a really great experience this year to see the kids recognized for just the truly outstanding work that they did, and their level of commitment was just off the charts, and I just can't celebrate that enough. So the fact that they were recognized by the organizers, by the judges of this competition, just I'm so happy for them.
Well, thank you, Mr. Adams. And I know you've done a great job over the past 3 years developing the program, and what an honor to receive the top award this year. So congratulations and keep up the great work.
Eric, would it be possible to have the students appear at a board meeting sometime and tell us a little bit more about the project?
Absolutely. Would love to welcome them.
Okay.
The next.
Are you, I think it looks like you're up again for the math presentation, Eric.
I am, Mr. Fiddler. Thank you. And as you know, we began with First in Math this year, and our teachers and students have done a tremendous job with this program. Our students have solved 15.3 million math problems on First in Math. Our schools have produced 600 mathematicians, each with 10,000 plus math problems solved, which translated into 54 grand champions, each with 30,000 plus math problems solved. And we certainly want to congratulate all 4 of the schools who are participating: Rifton, Watton Creek, Jackson Wald, and Lorraine. Each one of these schools is ranked among the top 100 First in Math schools in the US. And there are more than 4,000 schools competing. So it's quite an honor to be in the top 100 with all 4 of our schools. They've been doing a tremendous job with this program, and certainly we're hoping that translates into greater achievement for our students in mathematics. So keep up the great job, students and teachers, with first in math. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. And it looks like you're on the trifecta here, you and Tom Campbell on PSSA, Keystones, and AP.
Yes, this is another information item. I just want to let everyone know that we're wrapping up our PSSA testing this week. Our science tests in 8th grade will finish, and the remainder of our PSSA testing has already finished. So when we finish up the math, the science exam, we'll be working on makeup exams, and hopefully we'll complete the makeups by the end of next week. In addition, our Keystone exams are scheduled for later this month. Algebra 1 and literature are scheduled for May 18th and 19th. Algebra 1 at the junior high and senior high. Literature at the senior high, again, on May 18th and 19th. And then the bio exams will take place May 25th and 26th at the high school. AP exams are being taken throughout the month of May. They began this week and will continue throughout the month. And I'd welcome Mr. Campbell to say a few words about AP testing if you'd like.
Sure, Dr. Flam. Yes, the AP exams did start yesterday, and because the College Board has offered it in multiple modalities, we really have spread out through the entire month. So we've got about 227 tests that are going to be occurring on paper and online at school and at home over the next 3 weeks.
Thank you.
Great, thank you both very much. Now we move on to U.S. News and World Report data with Dr. Miner and Dr. Flam.
Yes, Dr. Miner.
Sorry, wasn't unmuted there for a minute. The U.S. News World Report comes out every year, and they rank all the school districts in the nation, and then they rank within the county as well. Dr. Flam, do we actually have a visual for that?
I don't have a visual ready now,
Okay.
but I can certainly provide one in the future.
We can certainly link one after the fact. At any rate, every year they do this ranking, and the data for the ranking consists primarily of data from the Keystone exams that are given at the high school, the AP exams, the number of students that took them, as well as their success on those exams, and graduation data. The data is always a look back. So for this year, the data is to the 18-19 school year. So we always have to be cautious about reading too much into it in terms of the current state of affairs, because it is always historical data. However, in previous years, we have been concerned with our ranking in the county. This year, our ranking did go up slightly, but it's still not where we would anticipate Exeter's ranking being. And the graduation rate, which last year was at 90%, I shouldn't say last year, in last year's report was 90%. This year it ticked down to 89%. And we had, as a district, as part of our strategic plan goals, identified a 100% graduation rate as one of our primary areas of focus. That continues to be one of our primary areas of focus. And we want to see all elements of the high school improve and be representative of the excellent education that our students should and can be getting here at Exeter. We recognize that the high school is a culmination of 12 years, 13 years of a child's education. And so we are working at the elementary level to reach a goal of 100% of students reading at grade level. And by the junior high, 100% of students proficient at math by grade 7. So reading by grade 3, math by grade 7, and then 100% graduation rate. So we see it as a systems approach, but then we also see it as something that we need to look specifically at the high school in terms of how do we manage time and schedules? How do we roster students for courses? How do we prepare them? What supports do we give to students who may be in danger of not graduating? And how do we identify those students early in the process so that we can give them the supports that they need to be successful? You know, although we recognize that rankings are important and they do matter, they affect things like property value, and a lot of people do pay careful attention to them, particularly with the graduation rate. Beyond the impact on the ranking, having 10 or 11% of our students not graduate is really our primary concern is about what that means for the future of those students and their ability to be gainfully employed and to have successful lives beyond our school doors. So we have begun this year, after working with the board, to create that 100% graduation as one of our goals, really analyzing the historical data available in U.S. News and World Report, looking at students this year in particular who are in danger of failing, and what patterns could we see in those students, and how could we try to triage to support them so that they would graduate successfully this year. And then recognize that we need to look at the high school in totality over the course of next year. So this year we looked at the schedules at the K-4 buildings, at Rifton, at the junior high. We looked at resources, you know, lots of different elements, but we said, you know, we wanted to take a step back because the high school is so complex, you know, with 4 grade levels and so many course choices. We really felt like we needed to take a step back and take a longer view to really make adjustments there. So in addition to looking at the data, in addition to setting those goals and having regular team meetings about that, we began this year by having a weekly meeting where Mr. Campbell and I meet with about a dozen students, and we're looking for a cross section of our students, about 10% of the student body before the end of the year. And we're asking them to share with us strengths in the high school, things that they think could be improved, their experience with academics, their experience with extracurriculars, and then anything else that they really want to share that they think would be valuable to Mr. Campbell and I as we look to, you know, plan for the high school moving forward. So we'll continue that work. Certainly Dr. Flam will be a really important part of that in his role. Mrs. Harris in her role with Pupil Services. And we anticipate that by January, we'll be able to present to the board a plan for the following year of substantive adjustments to the high school that we think will get after those goals. So this report in and of itself, again, it's a report. It does have influence on things like property values, but most importantly, it's a reminder to us and to our community about where our district stands relative to other similar districts across the state, across the nation, and within our own county. And we do take it seriously. So that's all that I had to say about it this evening. I don't know if Dr. Flam, if there's anything I missed, or Mr. Campbell, that you wanted to add.
No, I think you summed it up nicely, Dr. Miner. Thank you.
Agreed.
Are there any questions from the board about the Dr. Miner's report? I would just like to thank Dr. Miner for recognizing this. I brought this up as a candidate in 2019, told a senior member of the administration about the rankings, and the only response was a lot of silence. So I just want to thank you, Dr. Miner, for taking it seriously and for really putting it at the top of, I know you have a lot of lists of things you want to get done, but it's at the top of one of the most important. And one of the reasons I ran for the board is academic proficiency, and to make sure that our students are prepared for whatever they do, whether it's college, military, start a business, take a year off. We need to have the best for them. So I just want to thank you very much. All right. Next, we have the summer flex professional development from Dr. Flam again.
And Mr. Fiddler, that's a great lead into this topic as well, because we're going to get after this right away this summer with our summer flex professional development offerings. At the K-4 level, we're going to be focusing on Fountas and Pinnell benchmark assessment system and Fountas and Pinnell classroom. And to do so, we'll be leading those sessions with Mrs. Claire McRae, our elementary literacy specialist, who's going to be joining us on July 1st. We have those sessions scheduled beginning mid-July through August, and are looking forward to as many of our K-4 teachers as possible to receive that training on the F&P BAS and F&P classroom. At the 5 through 12 level, we have quite a few offerings, including sessions on ESL, diversity, equity, and inclusion, Newsella, which is a resource that we've been using with articles and opportunities for students to read and write. Our IT department will be presenting sessions, including a session on district instructional technology tools, which have been incredibly valuable and necessary for our staff in the past year, as well as sessions with teachers working on the Exeter Virtual Academy, as well as a number of sessions spent on curriculum writing with our schedule changes. So a lot happening this summer around literacy at the K-4 level, and around multiple different topics at the 5 through 12 level. So we're excited about what will be happening this summer, and a lot of teacher learning in preparation for next year's. We're finishing our catalog, and we'll have that out to teachers as soon as possible, hopefully early next week. They can begin to make their selections and organize their summer learning. So we'll move forward with that. And the last item on our list, Mr. Fiedler, is a voting item.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say it sounds like a great program for our teachers, and I hope they all will take advantage of becoming engaged with that program. Finally, we have Dr. Miner again with tips and camp invention.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Fiedler. These are two contracts that are we're asking be moved on to the voting meeting. Both of these are elements of the 8-week Tips and Talents program that we've discussed frequently throughout the winter and spring, that we're offering to students who have either financial or academic needs as part of recouping learning loss for students. And this entire program, the 8-week program, will be all funded through our ESSER COVID relief grant funds. As part of the program in its entirety, 2 of the 8 weeks will be Camp Invention. Camp Invention is a third-party provider. It's the National Inventors Hall of Fame. And they provide all of the materials, and it's a very materials-intensive program, everything from deconstructing a robot and reconstructing it to all kinds of experiments, those sorts of things, as well as all of their curriculum, in the professional development that's required to run it, et cetera. So, and that's a cost per child, and then that contract is included in there right now for 275 students for the first week, and then 275 weeks for what will actually be week 8 of the camp at $128 per participant. And then the other contract is for tips. And again, it's the same sort of thing where we're going to be licensing from tips their curriculum, as well as some of their other resources. And they have a different billing structure. And so we're collaborating on that as well. So this is basically just 2 licensing agreements to allow us to use other institutions' curriculum and materials for a portion of the 8 weeks of the camp that we're offering.
Right. Great. Thank you.
Dr. Miner, I just want to clarify there. Are we using, we're using funds from the ESSER grants to pay for both of these contracts? Okay.
Right. So all of that, and the ESSER grants, just to remind people, are the COVID relief grants from the federal government that school districts have been awarded, and 20% of those grants at a minimum have to be used to address student learning loss. You can certainly use more than that. And one of the ways to do that is, by offering summer programming. So there are other costs for these camps, including teacher salaries, those sorts of things. But in this case, and those personnel costs will be seen at the voting meeting as part of the personnel agenda. This is strictly third-party contracts to use their curriculum materials for portions of the camp. And again, totally funded through that federal grant.
Dr. Miner, I have maybe not a quick question or one that can be answered tonight, but do we have a fully fleshed out budget or estimate for what type of investment we're making in the summer program all around, whether that's on a 1-sheet or a 3-sheet, whatever the case may be?
I don't have that for you tonight, but I can certainly have that for you by the May 24th meeting when we finalize the human resources expenses.
Yeah. I suspect that it would be challenging because you probably don't know how many teachers you want to have yet, depending on the student caseload, and I don't think that that's been locked in yet. But I think it's really important that we would have that framework. This is a significant investment in something we've never done before. I think we want to make sure that we fully understand the scope of that.
Absolutely.
Or at least I do.
Okay, fair enough.
Anybody else have any questions from the board?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Fiddler. I'd like to ask a few questions. Dave Hamburger. In the past, when we ran TIPS, it was pretty much open to any family that wanted to participate. There were no criteria. It wasn't designed exclusively for students who fell behind or had learning needs. So have we changed the nature of TIPS, and is our community or our folks out there aware of the fact that they may not be eligible to participate in TIPS this year because their son or daughter might not meet the the criteria?
So in the past, TIPS was just widely open, I believe, to anybody who wanted to sign up for it. And then last year with COVID, it wasn't available in traditional form at all. TIPS had done some online programming as part of like the school year support, but with COVID, it hadn't been a part of the community programming last year. This year, like I said, we are partnering with Matt Hathaway and everybody who works with TIPS to utilize their curriculum with our own staff, which I think is a change from what has happened in recent years as well. So it will be Exeter staff members who will be basically, we're contracting with TIPS, and this is how TIPS is run in other school districts like Wyomissing, Schuylkill Valley, etc. In terms of whether or not it will be open to the public at large, right now we have about 275 students who are registered through this CARES grant program, which is far higher of a number than TIPS has ever had in the past. And so whether or not we're able to open additional spots to students who weren't specifically invited will be entirely dependent on our ability to staff additional spots. So it requires a lot of staff to do what we're doing. And so we want to make sure that when Dr. Holler is done filling all of those spots, that we have all of our classes covered. And in the event that we have additional staff and we can make spots open to the community, we'll try to do that. And we also have put out, and I believe Jen Breton, our new communications specialist, has put out the opportunity to the community to register for and participate in Camp Invention for 1 week. That will be totally distinct and separate from the 8-week Camp Invention. So it will be run separately over at Rifton to provide the community with an opportunity to have a summer camp activity. So that's still to be determined whether or not there would be any TIP spots that will be open, and it will be entirely dependent on personnel moving forward. I really don't know what we'll decide that we need for next year in the summer, if this will be highly successful and we'll want to replicate it, if we'll want to do something similar but for a shorter period of time, if we want to go back to a more traditional TIPS model. So that is definitely a to be determined for what the future will look like. But at least for this year, it's going to be entirely dependent on whether or not we have enough staff to support more than the 275 students we already have registered.
Has the new program configuration, has it been publicized? Is it on our website? Has it been put on our Facebook page or anything so parents understand? Because I know a lot of parents right now are kind of looking at their summer options. They're starting to think about camps, and they're starting to think about what their kids are going to do over the summer. And TIPS has always been something over the past several years that many of our families have relied on, depended upon for, keeping their kids active, involved. And certainly, those parents who are concerned about the summer slide, as they've always called it, that they'd like to keep their kids involved. What appears to be the only option for them now is the 2-week camp convention.
It's a 1 week full day, 5 day a week camp. I think TIPS has historically been 2.5 hours, 2 days a week for a longer period of time. So it's a different hour structure, the camp convention opportunity. And, again, at this point, that's what we're able and prepared to put out, that we have the staffing to offer. If we are able to generate spots and TIPS because we have the personnel, we'll put that out as soon as we have the personnel to do it. But at this point, we don't want to advertise something that we can't staff.
So have we at the very least kind of notified our families of what TIPS is going to look like this year, so they're not going to be blindsided? I know that they may not be eligible. I'm just saying.
Yeah, right. So there's, for the families who are have been invited to the 8 weeks, that was an invitation only, and those families have been notified and they've been invited and they've been registered. For the camp convention, that's been sent out to the public at large. And for TIPS, the district, TIPS has its own website and it has its own information. So I don't know, Matt Hathaway is not here to speak to this. I don't know in the past if the district advertised TIPS or TIPS did its own, because they really do have a very robust website and registration and that sort of thing. So I don't know what they have done historically. I don't have that information. I haven't been here in previous summers.
I mean, I think regardless, of who's responsible for it, I think it would be fair to the people of the community to make sure that they knew what the offerings were this summer, whether it's from our website or whether it's from kind of anticipating that TIPS is going to be available, and they just don't know that this modification to our format has happened. So,
Dave, what are you recommending that you would like to see something that says that, TIPS is not necessarily going to be readily open as it has been in past summers?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly, we certainly changed the emphasis. In the past, there were really no eligibility criteria, and there was no preference for students who maybe were in need. Maybe there should have been, but there wasn't. Of course, we had plenty of slots, and there didn't seem to be any problems, filling those slots for whether they wanted it because they were behind or whether they just preferred the enrichment, which TIPS provided. But I think an explanation of what's happening, so that the community can be, at least appraised of it, I think would be at a minimum important. I know some, as I said before, I think some people are starting to line up their summer options, and it would be good for people to know what they can expect in terms of TIPS as an option.
Well, I can certainly talk to Matt Hathaway about that and see what we can get out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Anybody else have questions? Anybody from the board?
I just have a question related to camp convention, and the question is, is that also designed to address learning loss, and if so, could ESSER funds be directed to that, since I think there's a $235 a week charge?
So there's two different pieces with the camp convention. It's a little complex. I'll try to make it not too confusing, just discussing it verbally. The TIPS portion of the 8 weeks of the summer camp, that's what we're calling talents and TIPS for students who have either an academic or financial need, and is thus being funded entirely through ESSER, is 6 of the 8 weeks, because that's traditionally how TIPS ran. It was always a 6-week program. So on week 1 and on week 8, we are doing camp invention, and on the times when kids aren't at TIPS, we're doing Talons, which is our own district curriculum kind of built around TIPS, because one of the things we wanted to make sure that we did was continue to preserve TIPS, build on, you know, the great work that they've done historically. So the camp invention is for students who have learning loss because it does engage them in creative learning, science, STEM, those types of things. Because that is outside of the week that TIPS is running, we decided that we had heard from a lot of parents that there was an interest in a summer camp offering. So there is a separate offering. All of the Talons and TIPS, that's the invitation only 8 weeks, is being run at Awatin, including the 2 weeks of learning loss for camp invention, and that is free of charge to families because we're using ESSER. The camp invention that we're offering over at Riften, that is the normal cost of camp invention, which is $235. We're not subsidizing through ESSER because that's for students who don't have any evidence that they've fallen behind academically or that their families qualify for free and reduced lunch. And so that's just, that is the regular camp invention charge. And so that's self-funded, that families pay that, and then it basically funds the camp. So we're not using federal funds to do that. It's because those children haven't exhibited needs. It's for, you know, any other kid who just their family wants enrichment in the community. And the reason that we can staff that is because it's the week before TIPS starts, we're able to utilize the director and teachers who would work in TIPS in the other 6 weeks in that week of camp invention. So that's why we feel like we can run the camp invention offering, but we're not sure if we can open up spots in the TIPS yet or not, because the camp invention is one condensed week of 5 days, and the TIPS is longer, so it's harder to have personnel over that span of time. I hope that made sense. I don't know if that was confusing.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Mike. Are there any other questions from board members? All right, thank you, Dr. Minor, Dr. Flam, and Mr. Campbell.
Mr. Fiddler, if I could just offer a correction to something I said earlier. School Nurse Appreciation Day is actually Wednesday, May 12th, not to be confused with Nurse Appreciation Day, which is Thursday the 6th. So Wednesday, May 12th is actually School Nurse Appreciation Day, and we certainly want to recognize our school nurses on the correct day. So thank you for allowing me to offer that correction.
Sure. Thank you very much. All right, that concludes the Education Committee report.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fiddler, for taking over on that tonight. And now we will move to the Finance, Facilities, and Audit Committee, Mr. Ahrens.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson. I have several items on the agenda, I think all of which I'm going to rely heavily on Brian. So Brian, do you want to touch on the purchase of the vans and the discussion of the bus bids?
Okay. If you remember in the budget from last year, we had a budget for 3 buses, 2 77 passenger buses, and 1 28 passenger wheelchair bus. We also had 2 vans to be replaced in this year's budget. What you have in front of you is the net price for 2 vans. The base price is actually $44,750 each, which with the options brings it up to $89,500 for the 2. Under CoStars, the discount comes to $11,000 was $300. Actually, it's a total of $22,562. Trade-in for the 2 vans at $4,500. The vans being traded in, one is a 2002 Chevy van, and that is valued at $2,000, and the other one is a 2011 Chevy van valued at $2,500. I questioned the low value, and they showed me down at the garage that they have rocker panel rust. So, we probably couldn't get that much for them if we tried selling them on our own. So I felt leave that in. But if the board wants me to, I can put them out for a separate bid and, just increase the price of the CoStars. I'm asking the board to approve the purchase of the vans. As the bus bids will be received on the 17th of May. Once they're reviewed, I'll tally those and bring them to the board meeting for the 24th to approve the bus bids. Delivery for the buses would be, I think, September through October timeframe. The vans, we're looking at August or September for delivery.
Ryan, could you share what the bid opening date for that is?
May 17th at 1:30. It's Monday, I believe.
Okay.
Yes.
And then the other question I had regarding the purchase of the vans, do we always go to New Holland Auto Group, or do we look for other vendors under the CoStarz agreement to purchase from?
We asked for three. We actually went to 3 different vendors, and New Holland was the first one that would actually have them in stock for us. So that's why we took their quote.
Okay. Were they the lowest quote though?
Pretty much CoStarz are all the same. The only way the other ones might have changed would have been the trade-in value.
Okay. Okay.
Brian, I just had a question about the buses that we're bidding on, we're purchasing.
Yes.
Has there been any decision about, whether those would be propane or diesel buses?
The 2 77 passenger buses I put out, specs for both propane and for diesel, so we should have a bid on both propane and diesel for those. The 28 passenger was only a diesel bus, and that's a wheelchair bus.
Okay. And the decision or the criteria that we're going to use for selecting whether it would be a diesel or propane would be based on cost, or are there other factors we'll take into consideration?
That's based on what the board decides.
Okay.
I'll be bringing you the bids, and that's your decision.
Okay. So we'll have a chance to talk about it a little bit. Because
yes.
I obviously have an interest in promoting propane as a much cleaner and healthier option. But we can talk about that, when the time comes to make the decision.
I do want to say that back in December, I started applications for a federal, I think it was PA Drives program, which is a federal grant to purchase electric buses. But about halfway through the application, they called me up and said they closed it off because they already filled all the slots available. So next year I'll try to get the application in sooner. Yeah.
Nice to know they're becoming available.
Yes. And basically the PA Drives for electric bus grants covers the cost of your charging station, plus the difference between electric and a diesel. The one thing you have to do under that grant is you must drill through the block of the diesel engine. It cannot be traded, it has to be destroyed, the block, the engine itself.
Wow. Brian, I have a question for you with the discussion of bus bids. Will that be back? Will we be discussing it at the voting meeting or at the next committee of the whole meeting?
I would say voting meeting. I'm not, I'll have Rick on the call or at the meeting. They would like to have the bus, in September, October, but we could always move it out a month if need be. The buses we have will last a little bit longer, and I think the bids will be good for at least 45 days, which could take us into the June voting meeting.
Okay, so we would vote.
You can either vote the 24th of May or the June voting meeting.
Okay, all right.
Brian, could you just clarify quickly too that the decision that the board makes in terms of the bids that are returned is whether or not we want to move in the direction of propane buses or diesel buses? It's not multiple factors underneath that because we have to go with the lowest responsible bidder. Is that?
Well, you actually will have 2 bids. You'll have a bid for a diesel bus and a bid for a propane bus. So you can take the lowest responsible bid on the diesel or the lowest responsible bid on the propane. That's up to you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions on the buses or the vans? Okay, we'll move into the food service budget for 2021, 2022.
Okay. This year with COVID and everything shut down, the state jumped in and extended the seamless summer option, which is basically everyone gets free lunches through this year. Because of that, we didn't have a lot of operating revenues, but our federal revenues or non-operating revenues increased significantly. If you look at the budget I sent, we had a budget for operating revenues 800,000. We only took in 84,000 because that's the only sales we had. But we had non-operating revenues, which is from the federal government, of 814,000 budget. We took in 1.3 million. When I did this budget, we were expecting to be back to normal next fall. But about a week or so ago, the government came out and extended the SSO throughout the full year next year. So lunches and breakfast will be free for all students, all children in the district. We should be better off. If you look at the budget as presented, we'd come out about 5,000 to the good. I imagine with the SSO, we'll come out about 15 or 20,000 to the good. The only thing that'll change, and I'll have that on the final budget for the May meeting, is your operating revenues will decrease to less than 100,000, and your non-operating revenues, meaning the federal and state sources, will increase to probably about 1.6 million.
I think since the time that I've been on the board, if I remember correctly, on paper, when we've passed a budget, each time we've been on a close to a zero-based, or sorry, not a zero-based, close to a balanced budget.
Correct.
Not small surpluses. Do you see that continuing? Do you see issues in the future related to any number of factors that would have a problem?
I see that continuing because the federal government's been increasing their subsidy for free and reduced, and also for per meal cost to districts. As long as they stay on course of trying to increase the cost of living, we should probably always be above water slightly. If you look at the bottom of the proposed budget, you have net assets beginning of the year, net assets at the end of the year. You have a huge deficit there, but that includes the pension cost, which to me, I'll say it's a paper loss, and that'll go away over time. But as long as your change in net assets stays positive, that means you're putting away at your long-term pension obligation and you're above water.
In regards to the loss that we experienced last year, is that something that we were able to recover with federal funds that have came in after the school year started, or is that something that was eaten by the general fund, or I guess it's the food service fund has a fund balance in there? Can you kind of help me understand that?
It was made up in the following year, but I also believe there was some carryover from the previous year. You had a profit from the previous year, and I believe, if I remember Ann telling me, there were some timing differences when the government reimbursed. So I'm not really worried about that in the past.
Okay. So when you say timing differences, that could be we closed our books.
You had a larger profit in the previous year, and then the following year you had a deficit.
Okay.
Brian, can I just get some clarification too? If I'm looking at the proposed budget for next year,
Mm-hmm.
I see in the operating revenue, I see a recovery of money coming in. Are you saying that's going to be federal money coming in, or will that be actual?
Well, what I'm saying is that 889,000 is probably going to be somewhere less than 100,000. And when you go down to the non-operating revenue, that's going to be probably about 1.6 million instead of 810,000. That non-operating revenue is the reimbursement from the state and the federal government. when I did this budget, I was expecting that we'd be back to normal, charging for lunches, collecting people, putting money in their accounts. That's not going to happen next year because the government extended the seamless summer option SSO through the end of next year. So we will have free meals for everyone that wants it. We've also started with the SSO, I don't want to call it a backpack buddy program, but students can take meals home for the weekends, which would be breakfast and lunch. Under the SSO, they don't pay for dinners, but they do pay for breakfast and lunch. So they can take on a Friday 2 breakfasts home and 2 lunches home for the weekend.
What about students who might want to purchase some additional food over and beyond the allocation that's available?
That's why I'm saying we'll probably be under 100,000 because they still have the a la carte.
Yeah.
You know, and people like me that do go over and eat at the cafeterias. I was at Jackson Wald on Friday. I got to see Mrs. Wilson reading "Click Clack Cluck" to the kids on video. But
Thank you.
and there's other adults at the cafeterias, so there will be some sales, but very little. You know, the a la carte and adults.
Good. Thanks.
Hey, Brian, can I ask a quick question? Given the largesse from the federal government around food, are we able to use any of that funding to wipe out any balances that exist or have existed prior to COVID?
No. Under
So we're restricted from doing that, or we're making a decision
we're
not to do
restricted
that?
at the end of the school year. If there is a negative balance in student accounts, we have to pay that off from the general fund. You know,
So we can't reimburse ourselves then?
We can then transfer that debt to the general fund. The general fund can kind of try to collect it, but we cannot collect it out of the federal or the food service fund.
Okay, so is there any consideration given to wiping any of those debts and starting clean?
Not from the federal funds, no.
No, are we as a
district? I talk to people in other schools I've been at. A lot of times, you know, people donate money to clean negative balances.
Mhm.
I think, Brian, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I asked Courtney this question back when we had the potential of the donations from Giant about whether or not there were any students who were carrying balances, and we could do. And she informed me at that time that there were no students who were carrying balances, which I think, Mr. Japina, is your question. Like, if there was a family that was struggling financially and they were in debt in their lunch account, could we rectify that? And so, you know, Courtney's account was that there were in fact no families who were currently carrying debt, and then that the food had been free this year. So I think maybe Mr. Fike is talking more about the whole of the cafeteria debt and how that goes into the general fund. And I think maybe you're talking about if an individual family was struggling financially, could we make it so they weren't in the hole? And Courtney assured me that there were no individual families who had, you know, continued to carry cafeteria debt. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yep.
Mr.
Thank you.
Mr. Fike, is that what you understand as well?
Yes, and most of the time, if there are some debts, there's usually people that step up, you know, want to donate money anonymously and pay off their debt. Even some corporations do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions on the food service budget? Once, twice, sold. So the next item on the agenda is the capital expense budget and the capital plan for 2021, 2022. Briefly, I just want to do a quick intro, and Brian, you can certainly add to this and maybe put some more flesh on the bones of it too. As we were looking at our long-term commitments, I believe over the next 5 years, we probably are going to need to look at potentially adding some new funds for projects that have not necessarily been brought up to the absolute needs that we have under our capital plan for the next 5 years, but things that would be important to have, such as resurfacing the turf field, I believe was one of the examples. Within that, what I think we need to keep in mind is that that might be coming up in this next school year or in the future, and that we should definitely be thinking about that as we move forward. One of the things that Brian had shared as well is that if we were to look for those new funds in an upcoming school year, it likely, in terms of what we would look to borrow, it likely would not extend our repayment or our amortization schedule for our debt. So I think that that's something that we should be keeping in mind as we go into the next school year and potentially into I'm going to do this off my head, 2022, 2023 school year as well. With that being said, Brian, do you want to take it away and correct anything that I said that was incorrect?
Yeah, the one thing that I want to correct you on is the turf field. There's actually money set aside or committed in the capital project to replace the turf field down the road.
Could you give another example of one of those projects then?
Yeah, right. So the turf field was 600,000. ADA compliance upgrades at Lorraine, 800,000. ADA compliance upgrades at Jacksonville, 675,000. Pneumatic controls at the junior high of 400,000. And there was one thing in there that I figured out, it was for buses that was committed to for 428,000, which last year I think that's what was committed for. I'm not 100% sure, but you decided to lease them instead, so that money can be freed up for other things from the committed and the capital projects fund. So there's 2.9 million committed outside of the 4.6 million that's available. You know, and there's 428,000 that can be sent back into non-committed for projects. I said can be sent back because it looked like it was for buses, and last year you leased the buses instead of purchased them outright. Mm-hmm. And this year the buses are actually out operating, not out of capital. And I prefer to see them either in operating because it's something you have to keep on doing if you're going to maintain your fleet.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do you want to go over the capital plan for this year?
Yes. Dr. Meyer can jump in on the interior signs of the high school. We've really had I guess it's been looked at for years. We had security studies that you really can't find yourself around the directions in high school. The signs are paper, they're hanging, there's no real rhyme or reason for the numbering. We have 4 different rooms with the same number. I think they're west, east, north, and south, and I'm not even sure how they came up with those. So in 2018 or 19, we had a PCTD grant signage. We got 45,000 to start with that. We have never spent that. We want to use that towards the signage at the high school, and the total cost finishing up that will be 145,000. So 100,000 out of capital fund I'm asking for. Dr. Minor, you want to jump in on the signage issue?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. So as I think everyone is aware, the high school consists of a series of additions, and so it is not really a logical layout. It wasn't designed all at one time. I don't know if it ever was properly numbered. It's not currently properly numbered. And for example, today, I came to the high school and to meet up with some board members who were there for teacher appreciation. And actually, Mr. Ahrens answered the phone when I said, "Where are you?" And he said, "We're in the back of the building by the entrance." And I was with Dr. Wright, and neither of us knew what that meant. And Dr. Wright, works there all of the time. And so we were wandering around for quite a while. Eventually, we called Mr. Ahrens back. We found, but there was no clear way for us to know exactly where they were. And in that moment, I was really thinking about if there was a medical emergency or some other type of emergency for a first responder to know where to go or how to get there, it is really problematic. Even, how to find an AED machine at the high school in the event of a cardiac emergency is really problematic. And not only is it, just paper signs hanging from paper clips from the ceiling, but there's no clear system that for a new student who comes to the school, again, any kind of emergency situation, how you navigate that school building. And so that is, in fact, what came out of a safety audit was that it was a very unsafe situation, that anybody who would come into the school in any type of emergency and not be familiar with it would not be able to locate a person in distress. And so again, that's why we got the initial safety grant money. The company that we're working with is a company who specializes in directional wayfinding. They have done it for large hospital and university projects, including like Lehigh University. And so part of the work is they will actually design the mapping and numbering system, because they have people who they specialize in directional wayfinding. I didn't know that was really a thing that people did, but it is. And then we have worked with John White, our graphic arts teacher, who has done the branding for the district on, what the signage will look like. So that was all done in-house in terms of art, so that they're attractive, but, we didn't spend money on an external artist. John has done a fantastic job, and we're really lucky to have him on our team. Ultimately, what we have decided on, because of the complexity of all of the different additions, is that a color-coded system makes the most sense. So there'll be the purple wing, the red wing, etc., and then a central map so that you could identify where someone said I'm in purple 242, how you get there. So it's a pretty complex project. I mean, signs might just seem like, oh, that's not so hard, but in terms of determining what the safest way to do that, and then having materials that will last over decades, and the installation of those materials into cinder block walls, into drywall walls, into all of the different places that they need to go. So I think it is a really critically important infrastructure project for the district in regards to safety. And by getting it done this summer, hopefully we can open up in the fall and be in a much better position in that regard. So the aesthetics will certainly be better, but the primary function is really one of safety.
I just want to add two things there quick. Lest anyone was concerned, I was not lost in the high school. And I knew exactly where I meant when I told Kim where I was. On a more serious note, though.
Fair. We knew Hunter was not lost. But.
On a more serious note, and Kim, I invite you to add anything to this if you feel the need to. Our police have good knowledge of the building, and they've practiced in our building. So unless anybody was concerned that they would go in and just have no idea where they're going, that's not the case. But this is just to improve and do better than we're already doing now.
Right, absolutely. I do think that's an important point, Mr. Ahrens. We have a great relationship with the Exeter Township Police. We're very grateful for them. They do spend a lot of time in our buildings. They walk through our buildings. So for the police in particular, there's more of a comfort level. However, if somebody was in taking, let's say an exam or something and wandered off into and an EMT who wasn't familiar with the area, those sorts of things would come in. That's really the concern. And the lengths that our police have gone to become familiar with that, maybe they wouldn't have had to go to, spend so much time there if we had a system that was more logical. But you're absolutely right. We do appreciate the amount of time that they've devoted to being able to navigate our high school safely. We want kids and other people to be able to do that as well, and superintendents and principals as needed to find board members.
I would think too that our new ninth graders would benefit greatly those first few weeks of school to know.
Absolutely.
I have just a follow-up question to, it sounds like a lot of the signage is really designed for the interior of the building. And you mentioned about first responders and emergency personnel coming to a school on the outside and having to locate a particular door. Have we, I know this used to be a recommendation years ago. I don't know if it still is, but are all of our exterior doors numbered so that in the event, and I don't mean just at the high school, but I mean all of our buildings, so that when an emergency responder comes in, they're able to identify where they are when they're entering a building or who might be exiting a building at a particular location. Is that something we've done or have considered doing?
Dr. Hamburger, we will be doing, as part of Act 44, there is a mandated report and safety update that I'll be giving you in June. I'll be giving to the whole board in executive session regarding a variety of safety updates and safety needs that might exist within the district. And that's something that we can talk about at that time.
Okay. I mean, am I correct? I mean, is that one of the things that's normally recommended, is that, you know, for the benefit of first responders?
Exterior, yeah, you are absolutely correct that exterior signage and clear directions, both inside and outside of the building, remain a high priority recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
One of the things that I think is important to point out as well on the capital plan, and Brian, you can certainly speak more to this if you feel the need to. The board has still not made a formal determination about what we would do related to the bus facility at Kerr Road or a facility elsewhere. But we do have allocated $1.5 million, which has been a number that was confirmed by our architect and is being recommended by the administration to keep into consideration as we go forward in the zoning process and the variance process, or variance process might be the wrong term, but the zoning process with the township. And that's going to be coming up for discussion at the Planning Commission, I believe, next Monday. I believe that's
17th.
The 10th or the 17th?
17th.
17th. So 2 Mondays from now.
Correct.
So that's going to be something that's going to be coming up for discussion, but we are trying to be prudent as we move forward to get an idea about what that cost might be and not be surprised or have to borrow more money for it either. So that's why that is there as well.
And that's the numbers that the engineers came up and put on the application to the township for what they're suggesting, or work with the township to rebuild the Kerr Road facility. That's current. The other things on there, go back to, I'll just go down the list. Replace carpeting with tile at Jackson Wall. That building had a lot of carpet tiles put in the past. The carpet tiles are starting to lift. First time I've seen carpet tiles upside down, but teachers got very creative to make sure there weren't trip hazards. They actually put them upside down. But it looks terrible. Lorraine School cafeteria and a couple areas, they also need tiles replaced. The cafeteria tiles are in bad shape, they're cracking. I think that when they did the work in there a couple of years ago, I had a lot of heavy equipment inside there and they cracked the tiles. The high school, there's certain hallways, it's actually the side hallways between the two long ones, I think second and first and second floor, looking at replacing tiles there. And there's certain stairwells at the rubberized, I guess you can call them tiles, but they're cracked or broken off. Kerr Road Garage, looking at the Losh HVAC system. I wanted to look at doing the junior high unit ventilators. They're coming close to end of life, but we probably have a year or two left on those. With the problem with ESSER funds being available and all the money the government put out, some of the things you're allowed to use that for is air quality. And a lot of the schools are redoing the whole air conditioning and heating and ventilation systems. So you're not going to really be able to find HVAC contractors to do this work during the summer because we're going to already be booked and probably paying a premium. So I was looking at Losh, we have several units on the that are in bad shape. They're leaking. Every time the wind blows sideways with rain, water comes down through the systems. So planning to do those, in the fall, winter, and spring, because Losh, we can move people around. It's not like there's children in the building that we don't have to, we can only do in the summer. Also, I looked at some old reports for the high school stage. There were some safety issues there. There's a fire curtain that needs to be replaced, some rigging, and some other things. So I was asking for $50,000 to, bring up the stage up to code and also to bring it up to snuff that we can have nice events there. Rifton Road roof repair, 20-year warranty. It's time to, I don't know what I call strip it, but sandblast it, repaint it. That's all the metal roof, and there's several flat sections that would also be under this program with Tremco. I think last time I had a quote was 680 some thousand. That was 3 or 4 months ago. They're asking me, they said they'll still honor that. I just want to make sure that the board wants to move ahead. We have some issues with the Rifton roof leaking on certain stair towers. I think stair tower A, some of the railings, and I'll call them railings, but they're actually ice guards, are broken loose, and there's some leaks along the sides of the building where the ice guards broke loose. All those things will be repaired and put back up. And I say ice guards, they're the guards they put on the roof to keep the ice from sliding down, on a metal roof that has a tendency. So we want to get those repaired. And the other thing is I estimated, high on sidewalks, but we have a lot of sidewalks that are deteriorating. The steps down the lower parking lot at the high school, they're in bad shape, need to be replaced. There's certain areas at the high school that there's just sections that have to be replaced. The front of the junior high sidewalks, I think they need to be totally replaced. And some of the other schools, there's some curbs and different cement work. But I'm trying to get a tally on that and put that out to bid. And most of these things you're going to be voting on a second time once the bids come back. But this is just for the budgeting purposes. But you're not going to spend it until you approve the bids. Any questions on these items or items you'd prefer to be looking at?
Brian, could you mention anything about the repairs to the tennis courts?
Oh yeah, that's. I've been working with Tom Legaff. We've had some major cracks down through the tennis courts at Losh. We've had those repaired. I've also had them do core samples of both the tennis courts at Losh and at the high school. I want to see what type of base they are, because the contractor said we can keep on repairing them, but as years go on, macadam starts moving, and the cracks will get larger and larger. One of the suggestions talking to Tom was we have, I think, 4 courts at the high school, which is not enough to have real meets on. That's why they have them down here at Losh, is maybe look at the possibility of adding 3 courts to the high school and rebuilding those courts and just put a top coat on the courts here at Losh, make the high school courts the tournament or game courts, and Losh the public courts, But I don't have the final solution or recommendation yet, because I'm asking Tom Legaff to move forward with that. Because if you basically rebuilt both those courts, you're probably looking at $900,000 to $1 million.
Your high school court, the far court near the baseball field, is the one court is starting to sort of cave in. It's on the far part by the fence, so somebody should definitely look at that, because that asphalt has sort of fallen into the rocks there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a retaining wall there that is a little. It worries me. It's holding back an awful lot of weight, and it's cracked. And I just wonder if anybody's ever looked at it in terms of its safety and integrity.
And that's why I wanted core samples, because I think you're supposed to have at least 3 inches of base or 6 inches of base under there, and 2 courses of 3 inches of macadam. And I'm not sure if they were done properly in the first place or not. The courts down here below Losh, I guess you call it Happy Landings. I think the problem there is the drainage. They probably put a French drain around the upper side, and French drains fill in after years. So instead of going around the courts, is probably now going under the courts. So we might be able to fix some of that by digging up around the outside and putting a new French drain to keep the water from going under the courts. But, you know, I'll get a professional to verify that.
Brian, it's a completely different topic here and not really of much consequence, but about, I think it was December of 2020, we had a gentleman come to the board and he talked a little bit about installing a flagpole at the one-room schoolhouse.
Yes, I asked Mr. Peruzzi, Rob, if he's heard from them. It was sons of some VA group, I believe. They haven't contacted us yet, but they told us that the December meeting, they'd be starting that in the spring and coming back to us, but we have not heard back from them.
All right. I mean, I have their contact information if you need it, but I was just curious if anything came of that.
Yeah, I'd ask him if they contacted him yet.
Okay.
They haven't.
Other questions from board members? Going once, twice. Oh. And then the final piece on the agenda, and then I do want to do a quick committee report after that, but it's the audit of the Exeter Township tax collector. Now, I just had a question about this, Brian, beforehand. Have we not yet received the audit for the St. Lawrence Borough tax collector?
You actually approved that, I think it was September.
Okay. Now, is there a difference for, is it just because of the scale that this one is coming later?
Everything was done virtually, and I think they were waiting for a letter from Mr. Diamond. It was just, the one was ready and the other tax collector wasn't.
Okay.
And I mean, there was no findings or any problems. I think it was just, trying to get the two together virtually. Because even though they're doing it virtually, the auditors like to see the person in front of them, like we have a meeting now on Zoom.
Okay. Is there anything that you want to point out in these audits?
Like I said, they're non-qualified opinions, which is a good opinion.
Good.
I put it this way, they're doing their job.
Excellent. Any questions on that? The only committee items that I just want to share, and we'll have more on this on paper as well. We'll have meeting minutes, the video of the Finance and Facilities and Audit Committee meeting is on YouTube as well. And I also plan to fill out some notes for board members in the agenda that I provided to everyone. So there's an agenda question, there's some background information, and then there's a note section for some of the items that we'll be following up on. The two big items that we'll have to discuss at some point after there's some detail and some meat put on the bone for them is the firefighter tax credit and then also the LERTA program. We received some, I don't want to say concern. I think others might say concern, but I didn't interpret it that way. But we received a legal advisement from our attorney that he should review the program in more detail for the firefighter tax credit as we want to move forward, or if we want to move forward. And I think that the board should go ahead and do that as we've gone through this process already. And we've had some of the members of the department coming here regularly, and board members have expressed an interest in looking at this. So I think that that's going to be important for the administration to ask our solicitor to do after we have some more details around what that exactly will look like. And we talked about some of those details at our previous meeting, and I'll be working with Brian to put some of that on paper so that Alice can actually look at something rather than just think about something in the abstract. Does anybody have any questions on those? All right, Allison, I am all good to go.
Okay, thank you, Hunter. we're going to be moving on to our policy committee with Dr. Hemberger. But before we do that, this might be the opportunity if you are wanting to make public comment. This would be the time right now to send an email to questions@myexeter.org for instructions on how to join the Zoom, because after Dr. Hemberger is over, it will be time for public comment. So go ahead, Dr. Hemberger.
I'll go very slowly so everybody can get their questions in. We have 5 policies on the agenda for May that are first reading. There will also be 5 that will be second reading, which we've already reviewed in a prior committee meeting. But I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Harris and ask her to walk through the nature of the various changes to the policies that are on the agenda. Mrs. Harris.
Thank you, Dr. Hemberger. So for policies 209, health examinations for students, and policy 314, physical examinations for employees, the updates contained in those policies are references to our health and safety plans that we've created this year in health monitoring. As you know, that's an update that we've made to many of our other policies this year as well. For policy 704, maintenance, the update is actually in the bracketed number reference that indicates which code or which part of legislation the policy is based on. And in this instance, it's reference to legislation related to lead testing. And Brian's actually going to be updating the AR, the administrative regulation, to attach to this policy for the meeting on the 24th, so that you can see that as well. But essentially, if lead testing is conducted in the schools for the drinking water and the water samples show lead levels that exceed federal standards, schools have to take some immediate actions, which include ensuring that no child or adult is exposed to the drinking water contaminated with the lead, to make alternative sources of water available, and to report those elevated lead levels to
Mrs. Harris, could I just make a comment about that?
Please.
We don't normally attach an AR or administrative regulation to a policy as part of our public policy document, which is on which is on our website. But this is I think this is an important part of the policy, and it has to do with something that's so critical to student health. The uncontaminated, lead-free, drinking water, and the administrative regulation itself, I think, really helps to explain, when and why we might evaluate and what our obligation is to report that information to the public. So I don't know whether we have the capacity to do it or not, but I would really like to see when this is finally approved. Not that we approve the AR, not that the district or the board would go through an approval process for the administrative regulation, but that we attach that to the policy so it can be seen, because the only way you can really access the information about drinking water on this policy is if you're savvy enough to click on the hyperlink that's added to this policy. And I don't think most people would even think to do that. So that's my suggestion. I mean, what we intend to do with it. I think I want to hear back from administration, but
Nope, we agree. That's why Brian's going to be working on it, and we'll attach it to the policy for the next meeting.
Thanks so much for that.
Yep.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
I guess it's more of a historical question. The language in some of our policies is difficult to fathom, given the propensity of the passive voice, which we should try to avoid. But historically, have we in fact tested for lead annually over, say, the last 10 years?
I don't know if there's anyone on this meeting who, I mean, Mr. Fike can speak to, what's currently happening, but I don't know if there's anyone on here who could speak to that.
All I can say is I have it scheduled. I don't know, Because I know most of the times where I've been at before, once you get the results back, you post it on your website, you know, so people feel comfortable.
Mhm.
Oh, is there a way for us to find out if we have in fact tested for lead?
I'll be researching it.
Okay, great, thank you.
But Brian, don't we have public water at all of our schools?
Yeah, and our buildings aren't that old that we have lead pipes, you know, but the problem is some of the old systems, and I don't think it's around here, but in other parts of the country, especially cities, you know, they might have lead soldered connections somewhere, you know, and that's where they don't want that going through there. But I also know the public water systems, they constantly are testing their systems, you know, to make sure there's no contamination back.
It's not technically a public water system anymore in Exeter, but you might want to check with the company to see what testing they may have done, at least as a starting point.
Yeah, and I know we've had water testing because I've looked at bills, you know, but I'm not sure if it's all the schools tested because they test for multiple things because they also have to make sure the water's not acidic for, you know, our boilers and chillers. They're testing those things every year. They're testing the cafeteria, you know, for the water that's used in the dishwashers because they have to have so much, I don't know, pH or, you know, I'm not a chemist, but we're paying for a lot of testing, but I'm not sure if it's for the lead test or not. You know what I mean? That's what I'm researching.
Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Any other questions about policy 704? Okay. Policy 709, building security, acknowledges the existence of the role of the safety and security coordinator in the district, which is me. Clarifies language around a controlled process for entry and visitor entry into the buildings. And it also actually removes some language that was previously in the policy that delineates who has access to which buildings in the district. That language is more appropriate for the AR, the administrative regulation, and so they've removed it from the actual policy. And then finally, policy 808, the food services policy. So this one is an overhaul of the whole policy in the sense that the original updates came in 2017, then there was an update in 2018 and an update in 2019, and none of those updates have been included thus far. So we incorporated all of them into this new policy revision. And they really surround some central themes regarding communication with families and parents versus students regarding negative balances for their food service accounts. It also includes clarification around the district's responsibility to do direct certification at required intervals to determine which students are eligible for free and reduced lunch. And it also clarifies expectations for the district to be able to provide meals and alternative meals for students who do have negative balances.
I've got a question about that. I thought I noticed, the language is very dense there, but I thought I noticed an inconsistency that said in one part, we can't confront a student directly about money owed, and in another part said that we could. So
Are you referencing the summary of the policy that I provided?
Yes.
Yeah, so that summary is taking you through the 2017, the 2018, and then the 2019 updates. And you are correct. The latest update in there, the original policy update from back in 2017 was that you were not allowed to communicate with students regarding their negative balances. That was later amended and adjusted in the newest update to say that for older students, there are some provisions for communicating with them as opposed to parents, but not for younger students.
Well, that's what I'm questioning. why do we want to embarrass someone in the cafeteria about their, I mean, the language talks about public, I forget the language, I don't have it in front of me. Why do we want to do that even for an older student?
We don't.
We don't, I think your, the language is food shaming, or we do not do that. What happens is if there's a negative balance in an older student, the office can talk to them, but in the cafeteria line, I know Courtney's on, she can verify this, they do not, I don't even think they see if there's a negative balance. They don't know who's free and reduced and who's not, and they're not allowed to tell the person they have a balance or not in the food line itself.
Okay, so if we're going to talk to a student, it's done in the privacy
Individually.
not in the cafeteria. Okay, I wonder if that could be made clear in the policy so that the public is clear, we're clear, and everybody is clear, so that a student doesn't think, oh my God, I have a balance, and now somebody's going to buttonhole me in the lunch line. And can we do that?
Well, I thought it was clear in the revised policy. It's just that these older policies where they reference it's something it's just been removed.
All right, well, let me try and find it, because I want to.
When you look at the new one.
Yeah, it's on page 3. So go page 3, like halfway down. It says communication regarding a low balance or money owed by a student for schools shall be made to the parent or guardians. School staff may communicate low balance money owed by a student for school meals to grade 9 through 12. Such communication shall be to the individual student in a discreet manner. That's what it says. So it's there.
Well, does everybody know that a discrete manner means in a private office?
It doesn't go specifically into that, but yeah.
I mean, you could. I've worked with lawyers over the years to say, well, you could just take a student over to a corner of the cafeteria, and then someone could say, well, that's a discrete manner because it was out of earshot of his or her classmates.
I think that's something we could further clarify in the AR, which are the actual procedures for those communications.
Yeah, I'm just trying to avoid having Exeter be the subject of the story in the Philadelphia Inquirer, because a student goes to them and says they
food shamed.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that phrase isn't in the policy, but that's what the public, that's the phrase the public knows.
And I agree with you. And that is the intent of all of these updates to this policy and updates to practices in school, was to really address that practice that had existed in public schools of communicating with students regarding their negative balances, and often in cases punishing students for their negative balances. So you're right on track with your thinking that is exactly what this whole policy is trying to avoid.
Well,
Yeah, like any policy too.
The way it's worded is the best way to go, but I'm just one vote, so, okay.
Yeah, I mean, and like any policy, it's only as good as it is when it's read. And so I think one of the things that's important is that a new policy like this needs to be presented to the food services staff and those folks who are responsible for overseeing the payments, and so they understand that. So I hope that's because policies are so many times just kind of archived, and we only pull it up when there's a crisis. But this is a case where there should be a regular process of making sure that new employees or those who are responsible for it are really on top of it.
I do want to say this is a case that the policy is way behind actual practice, because the food service is a federally run program, and it's probably our largest federal program. We don't realize that, but it is. And they're ground into their psyche, you cannot food shame. And that's been for the last 4 or 5 years.
Great.
Okay, but I think just to reinforce what you said, Dave, I just would like to see more specific language there so that it's absolutely unambiguous about what we're doing and what we can do and what we can't do. Mm-hmm. We can do it and where we can't do it.
John, it is listed that it is prohibited. it does say that in a different part of the, in a different part of the policy.
Okay. Well, what I'm reading is that was the summary that we got this afternoon. And it wasn't clear from that, but if that's what the policy says, okay, that's fine.
Are there any other questions or comments about 808? Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. And Mrs. Wilson, no other, we have nothing else from the policy committee meeting.
Hold on.
Today.
Hold on one moment. With the policy for second reading, I had a question, 137.1. I should have caught this earlier, but in the last paragraph underneath guidelines, we had an extensive discussion, I think 3 years ago now, about this policy. And I'm a little bit confused why this isn't here, and maybe somebody can help my memory or look into it. But that policy right there would exclude a kid from participating in the marching band if they weren't also in the class. And I know personally, while I was at the high school, BCTC student who only got to participate in the extracurricular activity afterwards rather than being in the classroom. Now I realize that's BCTC, it's not the same as homebound instruction. I wouldn't want to see a situation where a student isn't allowed to participate in band, or that their participation in band, which is a primary, I would think, you know, the allure of that is performing. So it's primarily something you do after school and do your preparation for during the summer and participate in those classes if you can. But that would count against one of the permitted per credit courses in policy 137. And I guess what I seem to recall is that we had put in that paragraph that students could participate in band if they were a homebound student. Can you speak to that at all, Dawn, or Dave? Maybe you remember that discussion, that I may be remembering it or missing a detail around that.
When you say band, Hunter, you mean band during the day?
Yeah, the marching band.
Marching band. So in other words, if they had a practice during the day, that they would be entitled to come and participate.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a recollection of that too. I mean, many districts are really opening their doors pretty significantly to homeschooled students relative to their ability to access regular education content, even beyond things like band and extracurriculars. And I know when I worked previously in the schools, that we really tried to encourage parents to request a certain amount of time if they wanted to actually bring their kids to, particularly high school students, you know, for subjects that maybe they weren't able to access adequately in their homeschool program. Maybe something that had a lab, you know, like chemistry. So I don't know if we do that at all, you know, currently, but I know that's been something that districts have considered. And I mean, this one is primarily focused on just homeschoolers and extracurriculars. But I mean, in theory, we could, you know, look beyond that to actual curricular offerings.
Yeah, I think, you know, Dr. Hamburger, I do recall that even last year we had some kids in the play that were homeschooled, a couple of them. So I know for sure that we are trying to promote that, because we might want them to, hey, why don't you stay in school, you know, and, you know, not have that burden of having them being homeschooled. They could come to our school to be involved in some of these activities. So I think it's more of a promotion more than anything else to make sure these kids are getting some access to some of the other children that are in these high school, in the school areas. So I think absolutely we've had, as a matter of fact, I think one of the main actors in the play last year was a homeschool kid. So I know for sure that they're definitely here, and they're participating very well in our programs.
Yeah, I think this policy basically just kind of ensures that, you know, students who do participate in extracurriculars, if they're homeschooled, are following all the requirements, you know, for, you know, attendance, and meet all the eligibility criteria, that they have appropriate, you know, insurance coverage, and they follow all the regulations and rules that regular students would follow. So I don't think it certainly doesn't exclude kids from participating in extracurriculars in any way.
Dawn, would you be able to, I don't know if you're comfortable doing it, or if Dr. Miner, you want to jump in on this either, but I think maybe just some clarity around that, because I really do recall that we had extensive discussions, and I think they really centered around the band. But even now, as I think about it, you know, that could also be the orchestra or the jazz band, to see if that would preclude students from participating.
So as far as the changes to this policy for this update, nothing was changed. Like the policy stands as it was. There was an addition to make acknowledgement of junior ROTC as an activity, but this is the policy as you have had it written previously.
Well, I guess my concern was it not changed from when we talked about it before? Because I thought that it was.
This is what is currently in, was currently in board docs as your policy. I'm not sure when exactly you had that discussion, but this was the most recent version of what you had, and we added the junior ROTC to it.
So regarding my question about following up on whether that precludes students from participating, is that something that we should do on our own, or is that something that the administration can do?
We can follow up. Sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
The last time we revised that policy was in 2018.
There you go.
How long ago was that? It seems like a very long time ago.
Are there any other questions, any other policy questions for this evening? Okay, thanks. And Mrs. Wilson, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Hamburger. And I'm looking, and it does not look like we have anybody for public comment unless something just came in.
Nope.
Okay, so we will our next board meeting will be Monday, May 24th at 7 p.m. at the Lausch Administration Building. And we will be moving forward with 2F, the tips and camp adventure contracts, 3A, B, C, D, and E, which is the purchase of vans and buses, food service budget, capital budget fund, and the audit of the tax collector, and then 4A, our policies, unless there's anybody that disagrees with that. Okay, so we will move forward with those items. Is there any board member who would like to be heard at this time?
Allison, I just have a quick question. I recognize that it's Teachers Appreciation Week and that nurses, Certified School Nurse Week is coming up. One of the things that I would like to just sort of ask here is, given that, you know, the enormous sacrifices that the staff have made really over the past, 14 months, is can we step up and further recognize the teachers by counting all the work that they've done, count as a summer flex day. And I'd like the administration to sort of consider that. I think it's sort of a no cost recognition, and would be a sort of more concrete way of also saying thank you for the efforts that they have gone above and beyond. I don't think we're setting precedent here. I think that we have offered something similar to the nurses. And I would just like to see if that is indeed true. First of all, if we could consider extending that offer to the teachers as well.
So Mr. Chapina, in terms of the nurses, when they have had to contact trace, and there's very specific hours that they've worked contact tracing on behalf of the district so that we can quarantine students in a timely fashion, they have been able to be compensated for that time. So that, you know, that's the very specific purpose of that. And I absolutely agree. Our teachers have worked incredibly hard, and I would like to talk to the board about possible ways of acknowledging them. The issue in terms of Summer Flex in particular is that, as you know, we have very important goals around reading achievement, math achievement, graduation rate for our students. And in order to hit the ground running in the fall, we need to have professional development over the summer. And so by taking away one of two daily, 2-day opportunities to do that training, I think that we would set our teachers up to not be adequately prepared for what they need to have been professionally developed and to do successfully in the fall. So I think if you would like us to, as an administrative team, come back to you with, a way to acknowledge the really very, very difficult year and the very hard work our teachers have done, we would be happy to contemplate that as an administrative team and come back with a recommendation. But I would be very concerned about not having the opportunity to have professional development for both days this summer, given the number of new programs that we have invested in and the expectations we have for our teachers to be successful with those. So that would be the dilemma with that in particular.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I won't speak on behalf of the board. I mean, I do think the efforts that have been made to acknowledge the teachers and the letter that you sent and the visits to the schools, were very appropriate. But I do think that people have gone well above and beyond. I mean, that's what a professional does. I get it. But if there was any way to do something was a bit more sort of concrete, I would just ask that you consider it.
Absolutely. We would be very happy to do that. And so, we'll come back to the board with some ideas about how we could do that in some substantial way.
I would say, Dr. Miner, before you do that, you might want to canvass the rest of the board to see if they're on board. I don't want you to do something just because I asked. I think the rest of the board would sort of need to also feel similarly. I mean, I'm sure they do, but I'm sure they feel similar about recognizing the teachers. I don't know if they feel similarly about doing something else. And I won't ask them to all weigh in here.
I'll have some conversations. Thank you, Mr. Chapin.
All right.
I have one thing to say. We're a month away from graduation for these seniors coming up. So don't forget to adopt a senior. There's a thing on Facebook to adopt a senior for graduation. My daughter, it would have been nice for me to walk her down the aisle on her graduation last year. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. But this year there will be something for these kids, which is great. But definitely take advantage of that. They still had a tough year either way. It's still tough all the way around. So I want to make sure that all these these seniors are acknowledged online. So go into that Facebook page, Exeter Adopt a Senior program, give out. I think I have my daughter, she took my credit card, unfortunately. So she's already has a couple kids that she's adopting, to help and, putting all that together. So it's just something that I think is worthwhile, and these kids deserve, as hard as they worked and, in these conditions, to be treated very well in their senior year. So definitely take advantage of that. If you are a senior, put your name on there. If you would like to adopt a senior, get on there as well. All right.
Yuri, can you just describe in 25 words or less what it means to adopt a senior?
So what I did last year when my daughter was adopted, like once a week, they'd give out like pizzas to the kids or drop off like a gift basket of some sort, or they, or something just to kind of make them feel good about them, the situation. Like my daughter got a coffee mug with her name on it from the college that she was going to, she's going to Penn State. So things like that. And so it was a really nice gesture, and some of the stuff that she really enjoyed, and it just kind of brightened up her day, especially last year when it was really as tough as it was. Yeah. But definitely take advantage of it. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
I know we have Mr. Campbell on the line here. I mean, I just had for my own question, maybe I missed something along the way here, but I'm wondering if we could get just a real quick capsule update in terms of what graduation is going to look like, this year. I'm sure it's going to be different than last year or the year before. Just if we could just kind of get an overview of what that's going to look like for my benefit. I'm not sure, maybe everybody else knows.
Certainly, Dr. Hamburger. Yeah, we are planning to host the commencement for class of 2021 in Don Thomas Stadium. It's scheduled for Wednesday the 2nd. And we have advertised to our families that each graduate can have 4 tickets. And we've mapped out pods for our families so that they can socially distance for the event. We're working with our AV staff and an outside vendor that coordinates for such events to make sure that we've got the audio and video there and the live streaming available for families that aren't able to make it to the event or want to watch from home. And it will look very traditional in terms of the event itself, with students on the turf and some families down there as well, and families up in the stands. Certainly when you start distancing them, it takes up a lot of space quickly, but we're looking forward to having everybody there and being in person and getting back to somewhat of a normal routine. And mostly, like, one of the hallmarks of all of our events have been throughout this whole pandemic is safety and inclusivity. So we're gonna have the whole class together, and that will be a fantastic opportunity for them, particularly as they've been so dispersed for the last 14 months.
And if I could add to that, just today, the governor came out with some news regarding what's going to happen in the state with COVID mitigation efforts that will certainly impact the schools. That was a late development this afternoon, and so I don't want to misspeak, but the governor's attestation order that I know everybody is familiar with, in terms of we have to close schools given a certain case count and we have to keep track of cases, all those sorts of things, that is going to be lifted and removed on May 31st. So even though we only have 4 days left of school at that point, there, we would no longer have to, track cases and close schools, etc. Also with that, many of the mitigation efforts, including the capacity restrictions, are all going to be lifted as of June 1st, with the exception of the mask mandate, which will stay in place until 70% of Pennsylvanians over the age of 18 have been vaccinated. Just a friendly reminder, we still have 2 more days of vaccines available here through Walmart if you pre-register. So I'm not exactly sure how long that will mean that the mask mandate will persist, but at any rate, these things will certainly have an impact on graduation. It may be that there isn't a distancing requirement, et cetera, and so more people will be able to attend. So we'll review that order. Again, it just came out this afternoon, and let the board know what the practical impacts of that are on the school. But all of them, again, take effect on June 1st, nothing prior to June 1st. So we should have that information by the May voting meeting for sure.
Just a final question about the graduation. Will the board and teachers be invited to graduation, Mr. Campbell? Is that pretty much the same way it's been in the past, or will that be modified?
Yeah. Yes, no, you will be. In fact, I was working on that this afternoon, and I need to get one more piece of information to get that invite out to you, and be happy to have all of you there. We will need to sort out some of the logistics about where and exactly how, but you're certainly going to be invited.
Thank you.
And Tom, do you have a time on the 2nd? Because I got to take off work already, so.
7 p.m. We look forward to seeing you there at 7 p.m.
I don't have to take off work for that, so hallelujah.
And is there
I am going to ask all of your assistance in making sure you're keeping your fingers crossed for good weather that week. We have a number of rain dates that can stack things up pretty quickly.
Okay, I was just going to ask that question. I mean, you have some backup dates then,
Mhm.
which it's not going to go indoors. It'll be, you'll kind of find another day.
The plan is to move it to the next day. So we have reserved the stadium through Saturday morning, if we were to need that. But our hope is that everything can get pulled off on Wednesday night. And similarly, the other events that we've got scheduled for that week as well do have rain dates that are built into that schedule. But we'll see how the week unfolds. But yes, currently we are planning to be outside, mostly to follow those guidelines that we have, so we could have the whole class together and keep them safe.
Thank you.
Okay, if we don't have anything else,
I have,
go ahead, John.
yeah, sorry. And this might be the result of a dream. This might be a senior moment. This might be Rod Serling standing behind a curtain in the corner. But I seem to remember asking a meeting or two ago about how Exeter did in the Reading Berks Science and Engineering Fair. My interest was spurred by an article in the Reading Eagle on April 2nd. I looked in the meeting minutes for the April 6th meeting and I didn't see it. So that's what makes me think maybe I made it all up. But the article in the Eagle focused on Conrad Weiser's achievements in the at the fair. It's held at Albright College every year. And I didn't see Exeter's name mentioned. And so I asked that question. And I also seem in this dream / senior moment / Rod Serling moment, I seem to remember that you, Eric, said you would check up on that and see how we did. I mean, I was just curious, not just from my standpoint, but of the public, if our students worked hard and entered projects, and even if they didn't come out as champions, I was interested in knowing how we did. So did I dream it? Did I have a senior moment, or did I actually say that?
Mr. Fiddler, you did not dream it or have a senior moment. You did indeed ask that question. And I did follow up, as did Mr. Campbell. Unfortunately, the news that we have to report is that none of our students did participate in the science fair this year. So that's something that we'll be looking forward to encouraging in the future.
Yeah, and if I could add to that, I want to give John Rugg, our tech ed department leader, credit for really digging into that. He's been in communication with the director of that program. And one of the challenges that they are facing and we are facing is that the way that that's structured, it's an individual program. All of the competitions are individual, which doesn't square well with a lot of the engineering projects and science projects, which are often done as collaborative groups. So they're actually reviewing some of their practices to try to bring that back up to speed and have that square with some of the way we have our curricula set up, which are designed for some of the other competitions we do, which are PA Governor's School and some of the TSA and STEM competitions that are team oriented.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Okay, well then that concludes our meeting this evening, and I will see everyone on Monday, May 24th at 7 p.m. at Lausch. Thank you, everyone.
May the 4th be with you. Bye.
Good night.
Good night.